Right then, so I'm going to talk to you a little about what Stokes means when he talks about ordered preferences, or at least preferences are ordered along the dimension. Now, it might seem sort of implicit, but this is a really important point for understanding why Stokes doesn't see that certain types of issues can be accommodated in the spatial model. So let's start from the idea within the spatial model that preferences are in fact ordered. So let's draw our familiar unidimension. And let's say this could be tax rates. So we have a tax rate from 0 to 1. And let's say that my ideal point, so my ideal point along this tax rate is, 40%, let's say. So this is Abby. But of course, we're going to all disagree on our ideal point. So our ideal points along this tax rate are going to vary. So let's say we've got Ben and his tax rate, or his ideal tax rate, is going to be at point B. And then we've got Chris, whose ideal tax point is, 90%. And then we've got parties that can position themselves along this scale. So the idea of ordered preferences is that we always have sort of people who are distributed differently along it, and that kind of creates call for parties to position themselves differently along the scale. So if we're thinking about this in utility terms, clearly a party that positions itself, let's say at a 10% tax rate, party 1, I'm going to prefer party 1 more so than Ben is, more so than Chris is. But likewise, if a party positions themselves, let's say, 95% tax rate, Chris is going to prefer that more than Ben does, more than I do. Likewise, if there's another party, let's say we have a 3-party entry race, and they position themselves, here, my utility is going to be decreasing in the distance away from my ideal point. So I'm going to prefer party 3 over party 1 over party 2. So this idea of ordered dimensions is that we can order preferences along this dimension. So we have preferences as voters along this, and those preferences can be ordered. And this is sort of like, I guess this is absolutely necessary for the idea that parties are going to be manoeuvring in this sort of positional sense in the first place. But Stokes sort of says, well, actually, not every issue is like this. So there might be some issues for which people either completely agree or definitely don't take these types of different positions on. So he was observing the Eisenhower campaign at the time and saying, okay, this is a weird one, because what we don't see this campaign being kind of run on is one of sort of issue positions. So the Eisenhower wasn't necessarily taking explicit positions on policy. Things like corruption at that time, career at that time, he's sort of thinking, well, these are the things that people tend to have shared goals on. We don't take positions on them. It sounds sort of a bit obscure to say that I like more corruption than Ben does, than Chris does. So these types of issues are not positionable. Different people don't disagree on them. Different people don't take different positions on them. So Stokes would say, these issues, it's more like saying, let's choose a different colour just to make that more clear. So actually all voters are kind of at this one end of the spectrum. And Stokes called these types of issues valence issues. So they're issues that people don't disagree on. They're issues on which parties don't take different positions. They're kind of shared goals that everyone wants to achieve. So it would sound, again, absurd for a party to come out and say, hey, I'm running my platform, and say, I'm doing that on promoting more corruption. So kind of in these cases, it's not about the position that the party is taking to appeal to certain voters along this ideological dimension. But actually, in these types of issues on which everybody agrees, it's about, okay, who is going to be the most competent and who has the most credibility in delivering on that shared goal. And that's where this idea of valence comes from. Now, this is super problematic if we think about the basic spatial model. Even if we can introduce multidimensionality into it, how on earth can we introduce these issues that do not have a kind of spatial element to them. And so this is why for Stokes, he said that valence type issues can't be accommodated in the spatial model because they simply don't have kind of a spatialness to them. So what does this mean in terms of our predictions? Well, it means that the model can't be solved. And how on earth will we know what a party's best response is to another party in terms of its kind of policy position strategy? So if we introduce valence issues into the frame, should a party focus on positions? Where should it position itself? And if a party focuses on valence issues, what type of valence issues should it focus on? There's no sort of strategic direction, at least in kind of a modelling sense, to know where the party should go. And that was Stokes's biggest issue with the spatial model, that some issues don't have dimensionness or spatialness to them. So what do we do in terms of predictions?